And we are back with Talkin ATL Hawks. I am your co-host, John Joyner, along with the twins, Andrew and Chase Jefferson. Um, and last time we talked to y'all, who did we play last time?
We
Last time we talked,
At the
huh?
conclusion of last episode, we just got smacked by the Denver Nuggets to
Yeah,
end our
right. Yeah,
six-game
we got.
winning streak.
Yeah, we just lost on a. Oh yeah, we were on a 6 game win streak, and
Yep.
we lost unfortunately to the Denver Nuggets last time. But during that time span, we had two Hawks games, two
Oh
NBA
yeah.
Cup two NBA Cup games, as a matter of fact. One went very well, and the other, unfortunately, ended our amazing run in the cup. So, I just want to ask you, how are y'all doing? Coming back from break, from
Uh,
school break.
I can honestly say that I could not be more relieved that this school semester is over. This was by far the most stressful semester I've ever had since being in college. So we made it through. Final grades are coming in pretty soon. I passed all my classes. One class hasn't been graded yet, but I'm pretty sure I passed. So
Yeah.
I'm just glad to know that we have a nice little break before we have to hop into that mess again. But yeah, this semester was extremely stressful. And
Yeah, same for me. Same for me. Like, I passed all my classes, so that's good. But yeah. So
Oh, look, I was passing all my classes like Trey Young was passing to those assists, baby. And
yes, sir. Yes,
but
sir.
before we get into because I know the main emphasis of this episode is going to be talking about the Knicks and the Bucks game, but because the Nuggets game was going on during our last episode, I do want to emphasize because we didn't really get to see the final stat line from all these players. I just want to say what an absolute masterclass by Nikola Jokic. He had 48 points on 17 for 29 shooting, and he had 11 free throws. And on top of that, he had 14 rebounds to show for it. So, I mean, look, for a two-time, should have been three-time MVP, when he's dropping near 50 on you, what are you going to do? And plus, it's kind of become common knowledge that when these NBA teams go on these big winning streaks, they're going to start to get worn out a little bit. And when you get caught behind a team like the Denver Nuggets, it's going to be hard to rally back. And I also want to say, what a nice bench addition Russell Westbrook has been for the Denver Nuggets.
Absolutely.
He has been playing.
I think he's starting at. Wait, was he not starting?
Okay,
I thought he starts for them now.
Maybe he does start. No, well. Oh, you know what? You're absolutely right. He does start. Hold on.
I know he started off the. I know like he started the season coming off the bench, but I thought like he put him in there, just to have.
He has.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I think he did start in that game versus Atlanta.
So I stand corrected, and I just want to say, Russell Westbrook, I'm starting to get kind of visions of that 2016 Russell Westbrook a little bit. Not so much in the stat line because he's not putting out those ridiculous triple-double numbers, but in just the way that he plays and the intensity he has on defense and his fast break mobility. I love it. I've always been a big Westbrook fan. I know he's not the most likable guy in the NBA,
but not anymore. He's changed. He's a changed man.
But even back in his MVP years, when he got on everyone's nerves, I just absolutely loved Westbrook because I feel he just brings this different kind of energy to the court. So I mean, hey, good for the Nuggets, man. Russell Westbrook is playing some great basketball.
And I will say this could be I'm sorry, Jordan, are you there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. It buffered on our screen a little bit. But I will say this will be a perfect segue into what we're going to be talking about this episode. What happened in that Nuggets game. So it was a mixture of a defensive breakdown. Nikola Jokic, like you said, just had his way the entire night with the Atlanta Hawks. And even Michael Porter Jr. and that guy, Christian Braun, who just came out of nowhere for the Nuggets this year, just had really nice games. But what really killed the Hawks the most was the lack of help on the bench.
Yes.
Outside of DeAndre Hunter dropping 20, and Conco had 14, Hunter didn't shoot the ball very well. And the rest of the bench, despite getting 24, 21, 20 minutes, they were absolutely unproductive. You know what that sounds like? This previous matchup with the Milwaukee Bucks, which we will get into in a little bit. But before we hop into that game against Milwaukee that took place in Las Vegas this past Saturday, we got to explain how the Hawks even got to Vegas in the first place. And there was one final roadblock heading up that was standing in between the Hawks and a trip to Vegas. And that was a trip to the good old famous Madison Square Garden, a.k.a. Trae Young's second home, a.k.a. the Quiet Place, a.k.a. Trae Young's Playhouse. And I will say this. So this was, of course, the quarterfinals of the NBA Cup. The winner of this game played Milwaukee in Las Vegas. And the Knicks were favored. If I'm not mistaken, I believe they were 7.5-point favorites heading into this game with Atlanta because for one sole purpose only, because the Knicks were red hot and Karl Anthony Towns, leading up to this game, was playing the best basketball he's played all season long. And it was finally starting to show Knicks fans why they made that aggressive move for him in the offseason in the first place. But if you know anything about the Hawks and Knicks rivalry, that every time Trae Young steps in the MSG court, he is the absolute villain. That villain arc grows more and more, and he finds new ways to crush the hearts of New York Knicks fans.
Have you ever seen the movie Daddy's Home, John?
Isn't that the one with John Cena in it?
Yeah. I feel like that title perfectly explains what it's like when Trae Young makes its trip to Madison Square Garden, because everyone knows that Daddy's home. You know what I mean?
And I'm very interested to hear y'all's take on the game because, of course, we were all watching it. And I will say the first half was just a perfect representation of a very balanced basketball game. The Hawks and the Knicks were going back and forth. Now, I will say that the Hawks in the first half shot the three-pointer pretty rough. And I think that was defensively, it was fine, though the Knicks were scoring absolutely insane inside the paint. In the perimeter. The Hawks' big defense was really good in the first half, but the Knicks could not miss a three, while it was the exact opposite on the Hawks end. The Hawks were dominating the paint, but then we couldn't make a three-pointer to save our life. But that mixture resulted in a very even first half. But what really changed the pace and the trajectory of this game was what took place in that third quarter when the Hawks won it 34-18, resulting in an absolute masterpiece by not just Trae Young, but Jalen Johnson and DeAndre mother-freaking Hunter, who just continued to play out of his mind off the bench. Now, Zachary Ricochet, though he did get how many minutes exactly did he get? Zachary Ricochet.
17.
Said though he did get 17 minutes, it did seem like that Quinn Snyder kind of gave him the backseat this game. And he didn't shoot the ball well at all. He shot 1 for 8, 0 for 4 for 3. But I don't think that was necessarily the reason that Quinn Snyder kind of lowered his minutes. Because if you look on the bench, DeAndre Hunter got nearly 30 minutes. He got right at 29, which is more minutes than he's gotten normal this season off the bench. But I think heading into that third quarter, he had Zachary Starr, but then DeAndre Hunter came in, and he just absolutely stole the show in that third quarter with Trae Young and James Johnson on the court with him. I think because of how well DeAndre Hunter was controlling the game, not just offensively, but how well he was playing defensively. I think Quinn Snyder kind of realized, okay, this is the guy with veteran experience who's playing a big quarterfinal game against the New York Knicks. I'm going to let the rookie kind of sit back a little bit in the second half and let the veteran take over, so that way Zachary's getting a learning experience on the bench, and DeAndre Hunter's continuing to do his thing on the court.
I think it's a little more than that too. I don't think it necessarily had to do with just DeAndre Hunter solely. I think Quinn Snyder was looking at this because at the end of the day, Zachary Ricochet is still a rookie, though he was the number 1 overall draft. At the end of the day, inexperience is always going to play a factor in games down the stretch. And I think Quinn Snyder was looking at this game, especially in the fourth quarter, that this isn't your average regular season game. The Hawks are playing for something here. The Hawks are playing for The Hawks are playing for a trip in Vegas to go to
Right.
Vegas and have a chance at the NBA Cup. This is something for a franchise who, let's face it, hasn't really been filling the trophy room as of late, really wanted to stack their program or stack their franchise with this trophy. And it came down to the aspects of the game. Next in the second half, they were really closing out the three-point shot. And Zachary Richshire has really developed and molded his play style beyond the arc. And I think Quinn Snyder is really trying to scratch the surface for Zachary to get in the role in the mid-range game that DeAndre Hunter plays, because that is a spot on the court that the Knicks could not stop DeAndre Hunter in, and we just weren't getting that amount of production out of Zachary.
Well, that's the point I was making.
Well, no, but I'm just saying I know what you're saying. I'm saying I think it comes from more inexperience, and Zachary.
That's what I said it was an experience.
Okay, well, Zachary hasn't molded himself into that mid-range phenom yet that I think he could have because of his size and what we've seen from players like Wemby. And I think Quinn Snyder just had to make the decision, like, we've seen you play for pretty much 17 minutes up to this point. DeAndre Hunter's clearly getting more production in the area we really need to attack, and so Quinn Snyder he just made that professional decision. But
Hey,
John,
I will say before we shoot over to you, I just want to point this out. Having a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 poster above your head is such a power move.
Okay. So okay. So you're on the first one to notice that I'm actually I'm always on FaceTime with him yesterday, and he noticed it too. And yeah,
Dude.
like you're the first person to notice that. But I honestly have no idea where we got it, but yeah.
dude, that game is so goated, dude. That was my childhood.
And you're
I
not
just
the first person to say this either. Like
I had to point that out. That was so nostalgic seeing that poster.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, John, we want to hear your thoughts, man. What did you think of this game against the Knicks?
I mean, like I said in our group chat, and like I said to Andrew during the podcast, and like I said to y'all on the podcast last week, when we hold the best players to below their potential,
He was
we
right.
win.
He was right.
And like I said, like Darren Brunson, he didn't shoot that well.
Dyson Daniels locked him down, baby.
Yes, I did lock him down, and like I said, I'll just go back to what we were saying about Zachary not finishing the fourth quarter. Like I noticed that, like the past two games, I just had like Hunter playing like Quinn Sanders had like Hunter playing like the final 5-6 minutes of the game. Like I think that's a good move, especially for how well he's been playing, and also like giving the rookie the pressure of not finishing. So that way, like Zachary doesn't have to feel the pressure of having to perform perform well in the final 5 minutes. He can just rest and just relax. So I mean, I'm fine with Quinn doing that. I mean, it seems to be working besides the Bucks game, but.
And I will say, this is something that y'all two have pointed out already, and I want to give my thoughts to it. I mean, we'll talk about it here in a little bit, but we all obviously saw what was that about? Oh, we're good. Okay, sorry. I thought I got a notification saying my MacBook was about to die, but we're all good. But anyways, obviously we all saw at the end of the game Trae Young piss off the entire state of New York, like he always does, adding another marquee moment where he rolls the dice on the Knicks logo as the clock expires to signify that he has hit the jackpot and he is going to Vegas. Aside from all that, we know what the kind of impact Trae Young had in that game, especially in that third quarter with back-to-back threes to really assert his dominance. But Dyson Daniels was like I think put the whole thing together. He was the glue that really molded this team, in my opinion, especially on the defensive side. Because in terms of points, he only had 9 points and only shot 1 3, which was a make. But defensively, oh my goodness! First of all, Mikal Bridges, I want to speak to you directly. Fix your jump shot, because this is what I hate about Mikal Bridges. Yes, he's a great scorer. Yes, he's got size on most guards in the NBA. But Dyson Daniels, who is 1 inch taller than you, why are you shooting like a grandma? Like he's shooting like his arms are like backwards and like he
He's
takes
always shot like that.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. But when you're getting defended like a guy who has the size advantage on you, like Dyson Daniels, you're buying him time to contest your shot.
He just has a slow jump shot.
And to get his hands on the ball, it made it way too easy. And then the same goes for Josh Hart. Dyson Daniels. Josh Hart, in my opinion, is one of the best off-ball movers in the NBA, and I think he really distributed that in the Knicks playoff run last year. But Dyson Daniels was so squirmy and so like up and down the court when it came to like moving around on-ball screens, getting around defensive paint guys to contest these threes on beyond the arc. Dyson Daniels, especially that block that he had on Josh Hart in the fourth quarter, absolutely incredible. It was such a silent moment in the game, but to me, can't go unnoticed because Dyson Daniels erased so many potential points the Knicks could have scored there to get them back in that game late in the fourth quarter. So salute to you, Dyson Daniels. You are a baller, man.
Hey, I will also say that the Hawks did a very good job in the second half of taking advantage of a tough situation that the Knicks put themselves in due to fouls. Because if you remember, Karl-Anthony Towns and Josh Hart were two of the biggest factors in that first half, but they both got in major foul trouble in the second half, especially Karl-Anthony Towns entering the fourth quarter with 5 fouls. And this was a point in the game where the Hawks had completely flipped the script. They took over, and the Hawks were heading into the fourth quarter with a comfortable lead. And then you're thinking, well, all of a sudden I got Josh Hart with 4 fouls and I got Cat with 5. Thibodeau had aka the Penguin from Batman, had to play his cards. He had a rough hand given, and he had to play his cards right. And the thing is that the Knicks were at such a disadvantage at this point because they were down by, I think, 8. Hawks were up by 8, I believe, heading to the fourth quarter. So this was a moment in the game the Knicks had to play aggressively, although they really couldn't because one more foul would have taken Cat out of the game, which eventually he did get fouled out. And then 2 more fouls would have taken Josh out of the game. And that allowed the Hawks to take advantage of a tough defensive situation because Cat couldn't play as aggressively as he wanted to. Josh Hart couldn't play aggressively as he wanted to, meaning the Hawks had every free will to take advantage of a paint where Cat was standing, and that's exactly what they did.
And thank goodness, because did you notice all the backdoor lobs that Trae Young was throwing to Jalen Johnson?
The whole second half.
Because Cat couldn't play as far back as he wanted to?
Because he couldn't guard the paint, and every time Jalen Johnson or Johnny Hunter drove in the paint, Cat had to back off and to let someone help because a little bit of contact would have taken Cat out of the game. And I just want to shout out Quinn Snyder for noticing how bad of a spot foul-wise the Knicks were in the second half and taking perfect advantage of that situation. So tips off to that is a prime and a supreme head coaching move by Quinn Snyder. So we tip our caps to you. And because all this happened, the Hawks took a Saturday trip to Las Vegas, not just to play the lottery, not just to roll the dice, but to take down the Milwaukee Bucks for a chance to play in the championship the week ahead. Now, Joyner, me and Andrew were at a wedding this Saturday, so we missed the entire first half of this game. So I believe.
Hold on, before we move on to this Milwaukee game, I just have a question for you, John. What did you think about Trae Young's rolling the dice on the logo? Because to me that outplayed what he did in the playoffs.
I love what Clint Capella said after the game. He went to Trunk. He's like, "This is your house, baby. This is your house."
I mean, he's a freaking king of Broadway, man. So what did you think about that whole transaction there?
I mean, like. That is his. I mean, like that is like his second home. He can do whatever he wants there. He can take a piss on the court if he wanted to. I mean, he can take a big wet dookie on the floor, and I would still like.
That's pretty much what he did.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Like so, like, hey man, he owns the place. Do what you want.
And I think it's funny to me how, like, this whole, like, persona that Trae Young has built himself to, like, for him and Knicks fans. Because this is a rivalry that the NBA really, really needs.
It's very underrated.
Because it sets a script that we haven't seen since the whole Westbrook and KD beef went down. So this is something that it's like a fresh of breath air that fans get excited for every time Trae Young and the Knicks play. And it's funny enough because for those who don't know, Trae Young almost went to the New York Knicks. And if you don't know that story, when the Hawks, got the top 5 pick and they made that deal with Dallas, the Knicks were heavily pursuing trades towards the Atlanta Hawks organization to get their hands on Trae Young. Yep. And if the Hawks would have pursued, Trae Young would have been a New York Knicks. Yep. So, yeah, it's this whole, back and forth between the Trae Young and how, his backstory with the Knicks. It's amazing to me, and I love it for the game of basketball.
And that's a great point. Oh, go ahead, Jordan. Sorry, go ahead.
I have to say, I might have to say anything else because y'all have to nail the coffin there. Like the whole trade deal. Yeah, no, I agree. Like, it's tough that Trae Young was almost a Knick, but I'm glad that he's here with us. So.
I think all of Atlanta would agree as well. And Andrew, that's a great point you make about a narrative that the NBA really needs, because we've seen narratives between two players throughout the years. You mentioned Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook. We all remember a couple of years ago in the playoffs when Damian Lillard and Paul George had major beef with each other. Yep. We know the whole Joel Embiid situation with Kawhi Leonard and the Toronto Raptors when they played in the playoffs. But it's not often that we see a player have a beef with an entire franchise and fan base, like we're seeing Trae Young have with the New York Knicks. So this isn't just a narrative between a one-on-one player. This is a narrative between a player and an entire franchise and a fan base, which is why it's not just the Hawks and Knicks playing each other per se. It's the Hawks going to Madison Square Garden and seeing that Trae Young can break the hearts of these fans once again. And, I will say I love Jalen Brunson's reaction to Trae Young's dice roll and the logo. Again, they asked him, they're like, how do you feel about Trae Young rolling dice in the middle of your court? He goes, if we don't want it to happen, we shouldn't have lost. Yep. And I think that's that's why I love Jalen Brunson, man. He's such a good loser. Like when he loses and they ask him about the situation, like, how do you feel that this happened, he's just like, we should have lost. Yeah. But if we don't want it to happen, if we don't want people talking, if we don't want these stories to get out, we shouldn't have lost. And I think that's a mindset a lot, and I mean a lot, of NBA players in today's league needs to follow. But, of course, as Chase previewed before, John, we're going to throw it to you first. The Hawks did go to Vegas. The semifinal was at 4:30 this past Saturday. Chase and I were groomsmen at one of our buddies' weddings, so we weren't able to catch the game until midway through the third quarter. So, John, I'm going to throw to you just opening remarks about this game, and because it was very steady, in between the first half and midway through the third. Initially, what were your thoughts, and what do you think really went wrong for the Hawks during this game?
Well, let me just start out. I didn't catch the entire game myself because I was out Christmas shopping with my family. So I started watching about the same time y'all were.
Okay.
So to start out the game, it is Milwaukee. They do have arguably the best power forward in the league. Arguably a top 5 point guard in the league with Dame time. I'm just glad that we kept it close within the first 3 quarters because we were only down by 6 at halftime. And Milwaukee's a tough team regardless of their regardless of their record. It's always gonna be a tough team when you got Giannis and Damian. But we played well until the final quarter. Giannis just went. Giannis would just played like Giannis back in 2018.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Back in 2018. Back in 2020, 2021 when he won the championship with the Bucks.
Yep.
But like I was saying earlier, we win if we hold the star players to below their potential.
Yep.
And Giannis had 35 and Damian had I think Giannis had 32 and then Damian had 25.
And Giannis shot 10 for 15 as well.
Yeah, we can't let that happen. We cannot let that happen. I don't want to say poor defensive effort, but Giannis is like very hard to stop. Like Giannis arguably is probably the hardest person to stop besides LeBron or besides LeBron or Jokic. So,
Especially when he catches fire, because like these past couple games for the Milwaukee Bucks, because we remember the Bucks at the start of the year, they struggled. It was a lack of chemistry. Giannis wasn't himself. Damian Lillard wasn't himself. But then they have a great coach in Doc Rivers. Now, Doc Rivers, say what you want. I know he doesn't have a lot of postseason success. People call him the Ryan Day of the NBA, but despite what your viewpoint is on Doc Rivers, there's no denying that he is a very, very knowledgeable guy, and he eventually got this Bucks team clicking, and now Giannis is himself, Damian Lillard is himself.
Do you not know? I figured you're going to throw that statistic out. I'll let you keep talking. I'm just going to throw just to add to what he's saying about Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers is freaking 13-0 in NBA Cup games. Because mind you, he was not Doc Rivers. No, Ham. Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry. I was thinking of the wrong head coach. I'm so sorry, boys. The Lakers won the NBA Cup last year. I was thinking,
and now he's an assistant on the Bucks.
Yeah, excuse me, boys. I was thinking of the wrong guy, but I had the right thought in mind. You know?
Yes, yeah. I was confused. Like, what are you talking about?
Right
it's
team,
the thought that counts.
Right team, right like position on the court, but like wrong guy. Not the head coach, the assistant coach.
I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, I saw your vision. I see what you're saying. But, yeah, I mean, like Jordan just said, like now all of a sudden Doc Rivers has Giannis playing like it's 2018. Brooke Lopez and Giannis is getting that chemistry together. And Damian Lillard starting to get more comfortable as they're building chemistry. And Giannis' best version of himself is the confident version of himself. And Giannis looks like he has that confidence once again. And I went back and watched the highlights of what I missed in that Hawks and Bucks game. And, like, it was like 2018. And I'll tell you this. I'm not taking anything away from the Bucks game whatsoever. But my goodness, especially in the first half, the Hawks just put themselves in a bad situation over and over again on turnovers. A lot of Giannis' points in the first half were solely on fast break turnovers because of bad passes from not Trae Young. Trae Young had one turnover in the first half. It was from Dyson Daniels. It was Zachary Ricochet. Jalen Johnson had some bad turnovers, and every time it happened, they flipped it to Giannis. He took it from one end to the other and just had his way. And that was a big thing that really destroyed the Hawks in the first half.
And I will say the turnovers got worse in the second half, especially coming from Trae Young. Now, Trae Young put on a clinic in this game. I mean, he almost had a freaking triple-double heading into halftime with 7 rebounds. When you have a guard like Trae Young getting 7 rebounds, you know you're doing something right in the box-out game. But like you said, Chase, this was more of – you were talking about Giannis going back to 2018 form. I think this was Trae Young in like his 2021 form. The assist numbers were down, though he finished with 10. These previous games, we've seen him averaging close to 15, and he had 35 points. That's a point total that we haven't seen Trae Young reach in quite a few games. You know, it seems like now, and he shot the ball very efficient, 9 for 18. So though the turnovers, especially from Trae had some really sloppy turnovers in that second half. But though the turnovers grew worse for Trae Young and the Hawks in general, another key aspect that I think that elevated Giannis' game and really was a thorn to the Hawks' side in this game was let's factor in when the Hawks went to Milwaukee a couple games ago for a regular season matchup, and the Hawks just took full control for all 4 quarters, winning 119-104. Game was never really close after halftime. Take a look at that game and what was the biggest difference between that Bucks team and this Bucks team. Chris Middleton was not on the court when the Hawks played in Milwaukee. They had Chris Middleton in this game for the NBA Cup. And though he was coming off the bench, he still had 20 minutes of playing time. And he shot this was the interesting thing. He shot 1 for 5 on threes, 2 for 7 overall, and 6 points. So he wasn't effective whatsoever when it came to offensive efficiency. But what made that such a big swing point for this Bucks team in their game against the Hawks was that the Hawks had their focus on Chris Middleton because they knew exactly the kind of weapon that he can be and the weapon he's portrayed to be in recent years. And because their defensive focus wasn't solely on Giannis like we saw when it was in Milwaukee, it became a disaster in the paint because you had Dyson Daniels worried about eliminating the mid-range post fade from Chris Middleton, leaving Clint Capella or Onyeka Okongwu by themselves when Giannis was on his way. And that's a matchup that Giannis is going to win 9 times out of 10. And another thing that became so hectic for the Hawks in stopping Giannis's efficiency in the paint was it became like a scramble to get to meet Giannis at the rim, which of course led to so many fouls because that's just the way things work in today's NBA. Your pinky finger hits a guy's elbow when they're going for a layup, you're getting 2 free throws. And Chase and I were listening to the broadcast on the Hawks radio network, and he was getting so frustrated with how many times they were sending Giannis to the line. Not because he takes 30 years to shoot a free throw, but because any ounce of contact was getting Giannis to the line, despite of how well contested the shot actually was. And it draws this persona. And it's like Giannis, this is what I hate about playing the Bucks and what I hate about what the NBA has done to Milwaukee. It's already hard enough to stop the Greek Freak because of how freakishly athletic he is. How are you going to stop him if you can't even touch him?
Well, I'll say it's not
when he goes to the paint. It's ridiculous.
It's not even sending Giannis to the free throw line. And like we said, we were listening to the game on the radio.
18 freaking free throws.
Well, so I went back to watch the highlights of not just what we missed in the first half, but what we listened to in the second half. And another big emphasis was the Hawks were getting no calls. Now, we were listening to the Hawks radio announcer through the radio, and he was stating his aggravation that the Hawks were getting no calls on their end of the court. I was thinking, I was like, okay, I've seen some missed calls here and there. So, I guess, the refs just aren't seeing much. I went back and watched a replay. They were worse than I thought. I mean, there was a moment in the third quarter that Jalen Johnson went up for a layup, got slapped on both sides. No call was made. Trae Young made a layup off the glass, and then Giannis smacked him in the face. No animal was given. Those are the kind of fouls that the refs were missing, and it was worse than I thought. And I want to throw it to, I think, one big disadvantage that the Hawks just gave themselves all night long, and this is what I alluded to when I was talking about the Denver Nuggets game, is 110. That's how many points the Bucks team had, and that's not bad at all. Though Giannis had a really good game, David Lillard had a pretty solid game. And
Taurean Prince, the former Hawk Taurean Prince, really did his work in the second half.
He did. And I'll say, despite all that happening, the Hawks overall played a pretty solid game offensively, despite Giannis having his way in the paint. There were
defensively.
Defensively, despite the Hawks having their way in the paint, there was a couple possessions that their paint defense was really locked down. But what destroyed the Hawks the most Saturday evening is the lack of bench help given. And this is what shocked me the most, was how horrible of a performance DeAndre Hunter had, shooting 5 for 16 in 30 minutes, 15 points. But not only that, his free throw shooting was absolutely abysmal. There was a lot of times in the fourth quarter that Hunter went to the free throw line with a chance to cut the lead down more and more, but he just missed free throws. And there were a couple of times he missed both free throws. And those are just things you never see from DeAndre Hunter, and especially the DeAndre Hunter is a guy that the Hawks have relied on a lot all season. He was a big reason why the Hawks got on that 6-game win streak. So it's just, though the Hawk is a very balanced roster. You had Trae Young, who's like the star of the Hawks, but then everyone else is very balanced and they work together. But if you have the bench not clicking with the starting lineup, the team's going to collapse. Like with the state of the NBA right now, one thing that if you look at all the NBA Finals teams, one thing you will notice is how deep that team is. It is vitally important to have a deep roster in the NBA. That's a good starting lineup and a good bench. If your starting lineup's not clicking or your bench isn't clicking, you're going to collapse. And that is exactly what we saw, not only in that Denver Nuggets game, but even worse offensively in that Milwaukee game. And though it's like a loss you can't really hang yourself high in, because the Hawks had a great run and they played the Bucks a great game, but still very aggravating, because if the Hawks just played like themselves, like we've been seeing the past couple of weeks, this could be a very different outcome, and it could be the Hawks playing on that championship game instead of the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah. I mean, like you're saying, Chase, we can't be like too upset because no one expected us to go this far. I'm pretty sure people expect us to lose to Boston, Boston, and then the Cavs, which you took care of business against. But I mean, yeah, like it is disappointing to get this far and not be able to go to, to not be able to play for the cup. But again, still a great run. I'm still proud of our team. We can only go up from here.
Absolutely. And I think another thing that really aggravated me in this game, Chase, and it goes with what you said about the missed free throws and all of that, and the Hawks holding the Bucks to just 110 despite Giannis's masterclass, is the missed opportunities. This game had so many missed opportunities down the stretch, even within the 5-minute mark. There was countless possessions where the Hawks would get a much-needed stop. We'd have an open look from the three-point line to either cut the lead to 2 or 1, tie the game, even some points taking the lead in general, and the Hawks just failed to execute their shots and get them to fall in. And you talk about, Chase, how big of a turnover problem the Hawks had. The Bucks let's not pretend the Bucks were playing a clean game either. They had just one less turnover than the Hawks did. Only problem is they converted their turnovers to points. The Hawks just came up empty-handed every single time, and I think a lot of fingers, because I'm not a kind of guy, and I know I'm speaking for you, Chase, and I'm sure I'm speaking for you, John, too. We're not sitting here trying to say that bad officiating is the reason we lost, because I never want to use that as an excuse. The Hawks lost this game because we failed to execute on the opportunities we did have.
Yep.
So the Hawks still lost the game themselves nonetheless. I'm not saying the bad officiating wasn't a factor, but it's not the reason the Hawks came up shorthanded.
Yep.
But it is a good sign. We saw a lot of good things from this Hawks team, and it really seems like that this 2024 Atlanta team has finally figured something out.
Absolutely.
With the way Trae Young plays and the way he can really be a big contributor to the teammates around him, this is something that I haven't seen from the Atlanta team since our 2021 playoff run, and I think that is a magical moment we could relive again just based on what I've seen from the past few games, even in that loss to the Milwaukee Bucks. So I do want to give a big round of applause to Atlanta for making this magical run, because like you said, John, the Hawks weren't even supposed to get out of our group.
No,
because we were put in a group with Boston and Cleveland. There was no shot the Hawks were supposed to get out, but we won the group. It was miraculous. The Hawks are doing incredible things, and I couldn't be prouder.
And like you said, Andrew, Steve Holman kept calling it getting over the hump. The Hawks are right there. They had one more hurdle to jump to take the lead on the Bucks, and we just couldn't do it. But like you said, we're all congratulating the Atlanta Hawks. Now, to end this podcast, I think, Joyner, I want to shoot to you, and I want you to kind of give the audience listening today. The Hawks, no question, we've been red hot these past 2 weeks. This is the best Hawks basketball we have seen all season long. And though coming off a great run in the NBA Cup, we're losing a heartbreaker to the Bucks in the semifinals, what do the Hawks need to do to keep this momentum rolling so we can continue to climb the Eastern Conference standings and not let this NBA Cup loss ruin our momentum?
Like I've been saying, just play good defense on the league's best players. That's what I'm saying. I'm just like I've been saying. We play good defense on the team's best players. We win. We hold them to below par. We win. I'm saying just playing good defense, and then like Trae Young just gotta keep cooking. He's gotta keep cooking and keep leading this team.
You're absolutely right, Joyner. When I was watching the replay of the Hawks game, the commentators on the TNT podcast were mentioning how Trae Young has kind of stepped out of this superstar role and more into a leadership role. And ever since he's done so, we've talked about it every episode of the podcast since that Bulls game, that it's been the best version of Trae Young that we have seen probably since he's been in the NBA. And that's a sole reason why the Hawks have been red hot. So that's something I want to see continue out of Trae Young. Andrew, you talked about it in that Milwaukee game. It kind of seemed like Trae Young turned the clock back and became more into that Steph Curry role like we've seen in previous years of Trae Young. But heading out of this NBA Cup loss and as the season continues, I want to see more of that Steve Nash and more of that leadership version of Trae Young, because that is the reason we're getting the players more involved, like Jalen Johnson, Dyson Daniels, Bogey Bogdanovic, DeAndre Hunter. And not only is Trae Young starting to thrive and is continuing to dominate the league in assists, but players, his counterparts, are thriving with him as well, which is just pushing this team over the edge. Quinn Snyder's finally getting his vision that he's had with the Atlanta Hawks to join the franchise, and this is a team that can make, like, a lot of people didn't think the Hawks would even make the play-in this year, but based on how we've been playing, we're showing that we can compete with anybody. We said it, beating Celtics on the road without Trae Young, DeAndre Hunter,
beating the Cavs back-to-back games, competing with the Milwaukee Bucks in the NBA Cup. This is a version of the Hawks team that can compete with anybody. So if we can find a way to maintain this momentum and keep it consistent, this is a team that could sneak into the playoffs and really shock the lead and really set the foundation of the direction that Quinn Snyder and Landry Fields are trying to push the Hawks and the future of this franchise.
And I do want to say the good thing about the Hawks, one of the big pluses about the Hawks making the semifinals in the NBA Cup is whether you win or lose, especially if you lose, though, you do get a really nice break. You get a nice break to come back home, regroup, get your team back in one shape, get them healthy, get them relaxed, get them, tampered with in the way that you want before you make your next trip. As the Hawks are going to San Antonio on Thursday night, that will be our next game. So we played on Saturday, and we get almost a full week break, which is something you don't ever see slap in the middle of an NBA regular season. And this is a matchup that I think is very intriguing for more than one reason. First of all, San Antonio is sitting at 500, 13-13. This is a group that, to me, has meshed really well with the new foundation that they have in their playmaker, Chris Paul. And now he's really complemented Wemby's game and allow him to be more of an off-ball kind of guy, because Chris Paul is always going to be looking to create that best scoring opportunity for his new stud in Victor Wembanyama. And speaking of Victor Wembanyama, this is the battle of the Frenchies, baby. Both Victor and Zachary Richardson are coming out of the same French basketball league where they both dominated both ends of the court, and now for the first time ever in a National Basketball Association, they will be facing each other one-on-one on Thursday night. To me, this is primetime basketball right here. Back-to-back number one overall picks coming together on the court for a battle in San Antonio, where Charles Barkley likes to say the girls are big. The girls are big in San Antonio. But regardless, I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be fun. I cannot wait to see Trae Young, Chris Paul versus Chris Paul, and Victor Wembanyama versus Zachary Richardson. It's going to be incredible.
Can't wait.
And they share very similar archetypes too. They both like to shoot the three-point shot. They both dominate in the paint. They're both great at rebounding. Though Victor Wembanyama is he is a lot more athletic with it. But the similar archetypes, they're going to be guarding each other, and this is going to make for a very, very intriguing matchup. So yeah, I'm definitely excited to see it.
Yeah, my only concern is the height difference because Victor is 7'4" and Zach is 6'10", 6'9".
Right.
That's the only downside to it. But
yeah,
it could be a good game regardless.
Victor has 6 inches on Zachary Richardson. So Zachary's going to need some help in the box-out game. But in terms of overall defense, I do like the matchup. Absolutely.
I think Clint will help with the rebounding. Well, I think Clint. I think Clint's gonna help. Is gonna be able to box out Victor pretty good. But
And I'd hope so. Clint Capella this year, he's been like his Houston Rockets self, and he's been a great rebounder this year. So that should definitely be a big factor that the Hawks can probably use to take advantage of that Spurs team. But that outside of Victor Wembanyama, this is a pretty small lineup. So if the Hawks can maintain and dominate on the rebounding side of the ball, that's a huge advantage for the Hawks.
Absolutely.
But I guess before we end this podcast, does anyone have any final comments?
I think I've made my presence known.
I think I'm good. I'm good. This is a good episode.
I agree, Joyner. So why don't you go ahead and send us home?
All right. This has been another great episode of Talkin ATL Hawks. Again, thank you to Andrew and Chase for joining me today, and we will see you guys next week.